With our plenary keynote session, where we have two distinguished speakers who will both join us online. We have Professor Cecilia Totahada from the University of Glasgow, Scotland, and Professor Salimul Haq, who is the Director of the International Center for Climate Change and Development in Bangladesh. To moderate this session, I would like to invite Professor Taikan Oki, who is a professor in the Graduate School of Engineering at the University of Tokyo, Japan.
Thank you very much. And do we have Cecilia online already? Okay. Yeah. So Cecilia, good morning. Okay. Before she will appear on the screen, let me introduce her. It's my best honor to introduce Cecilia Totahada, currently the professor of the University of Glasgow. I firstly met with her, Cecilia, in 1997 when the Second World Water Forum was held in Hague in the Netherlands, when the Next Generation Water Leaders Program was launched. At that time, I was just about 30 years old, and similar age of the water scientists at the time were gathered Cecilia, good morning. Yes, and including for example, Johan Rockström, or the Aaron Wolf, and these people gathered together and we discussed about what could be needed in the coming decades. And decades has passed, but still I'm very happy that we, Cecilia, myself, and some few of us are remaining in this field. And she has hold a career of professional in practice in innovation, School of Interdisciplinary Studies, University of Glasgow, UK. And she has many positions, including editorial board. But I would like to emphasize that she has been always stressed in the interface between the science and policy. And she has been working on the importance of governance to solve water issues. So I think that her talk today about the future of water management and the need to adopt a systematic approach would be very much beneficial for this symposium. So Cecilia, floor is yours, and please summarize your talk by maybe approximate 20 minutes, then we can have a more discussions in deep. So floor is yours, Cecilia. Please, people, welcome her.
Indeed, I can. Very good seeing you, and I would like to thank Dr. Babel and the organizers for inviting me today. And I will be, let me just share my presentation, but I will be speaking on aspects which are of importance to all of us, which is, we are speaking now about the system thinking, and basically what we're trying to say, what we're saying, that we have to see the aspects from a broader perspective. As Taikan said, a very important perspective is that of the policy aspects. We have to go out of the academia and realize what is happening, and how do we tailor our studies? How do we learn about? How do we implement what we are teaching and what we are learning? And let me see. Here I am. Right. Can you see the presentation? Excuse me. Can you see can the presentation be seen? I'm not getting any response. Okay, so here it is a presentation. So let me start again then with this future of water management. I like to think towards the future because that's the way we all should be thinking. And let me start with a very basic framework for policy evaluation, which we all learn in the school, and which implies this policy content, policy implementation, and policy impact. And that includes several steps, from stakeholders to description of program, evaluation design, credible evidence, justify conclusions, and ensure use and share lessons learned with the standards of utility, feasibility, propriety, and accuracy. And then we have to ask ourselves if this is what we are doing when we talk about water. Are we doing our policy evaluation at every step? Are we doing the policy evaluation when we allocate water, when we know that it is over-allocated, when we have it? What is it that is happening to our water use, not only during drought conditions or flood conditions, but also during events that are out of our control, like it was the case of COVID-19, and continues being in several cases, and also in the case of armed conflict, not only in Ukraine, but in other places. So how do we plan? How do we consider our policy? Reflecting, of course, on reality and utilizing the knowledge we have. So let me put some example that is very close to all of us, because it is what happened this summer in many parts, not all of the world, but in many parts of the world. And what were the management reactions, the policy reactions, and on which many of the situations depended? Here we have an image we have in the United States of the lake power. It affected, as it affected in many other places, water supply, agricultural production, and in this case also affected transportation. It affected recreation. The solution so far was development of infrastructure, as it was in many cases, plus policy responses at the state level. These are views in Utah, and also in this case it was several states, but also at the federal level. Not only funding, but how to use the water, how to reallocate it. This is a view of the different hydropower plants in general in the United States. Not all were affected, but many of them were. In the case of California, for example, nuclear plant that was planned to decommission was not decommissioned because you need a source of energy, and you didn't have your clean energy, your hydropower energy is not reliable. We have, for example, in the case of Europe, the River Rhine. We see it here as normal with the normal flow of water, and we have it here in August 22. So again, the river Rhine is a very important transport link for Europe, and it moves over 300 million tons of goods per year. And the water levels were so low that the transportation was interrupted, with the different consequences that this had. This is, for example, the Po River in Italy, which is the largest reservoir of fresh water. It is used, much of it, by farmers. And in this, the worst drought in 70 years, it had many impacts for the different users. Yangtze River, moving to China, and it was not the entire Yangtze River, it was part of the Yangtze rivers that were impacted, and with it impacting more than 400 million people, and the level of water was so low, again, that it affected shipping routes, it limited drinking water supplies, it caused rolling blackouts. These are several photographs on the right-hand side. We see that we basically don't see the water because it's not there anymore. What happened in terms of agriculture? We see impact of agriculture in the European Union. As we can see, the drought was it was not only very intense, but it was sustained, which is the worst part, because it doesn't give you the time to, well, you have to cope with it and you have to adapt to it. And there were numerous policy responses. And the reason why there was, because if we had seen this situation in another parts of the world, we would have expected famine, we would have expected more government interventions, and not in Europe, because there are already systems, because there are policies, and because there are institutions. Let's see an example in Spain, where there were in several parts of Spain, the losses were estimated at 8 to 10 billion euros, and the sector that was the most affected was the olive sector, the olive oil sector. The farmers in that part of Spain, they said that they wanted a case study, because yes, this was a result of rainfall, it was a result of climate change, but it's also the result of a growing number of water demands. Low efficiency in water use, reduced surface runoff due to the abandonment of rain-fed crops. So with this, what I want to say is that yes, it is climate change, yes, it is less rainfall and higher temperatures, but it is also the less efficiency with which we are using our resources. We come to the very important case of California, important because of the agricultural produce that sustains part of US and the rest of the world. And what we have is that there was a net water shortage in several places that affected, again, agriculture, and that affected dry domestic wells. Is it the first time it happens that there is a drought in California? Of course not. California is affected by droughts, one after another. And California is not, this is what you can see in several places. It's not strange to droughts. There have been sectors that have been out in the 2011-2016 drought. Several of the sectors, they moved to another states. This is the drought I just mentioned. Of course, there is the water rights. And during the California drought, 2011-2016, at the end of it, the government of California came out with the Groundwater Act. And let's see what happened with the Groundwater Act during this drought. So in the drought 2011-2016, that ended in 2016, only to start again, the driest, many times we say the driest from a certain year, but it's because it's when the records started. Most severe drought in the last 1,200 years, lowest ever annual precipitation, third driest on record in terms of precipitation. So there were, again, the drought was very intense and it was sustained. Crops were changed, regulations came, and what has happened after that, or what happened at that time and what happened during this drought? It happened, what we know happens everywhere. When there is no rainfall, we use groundwater. In places as in the Central Valley in California, as in many other parts of the world, where agriculture or water supply or industry depends your second plan, your plan B is groundwater, you will use it more because you need a source, reliable source of water. And we did many times it comes subsidence. So, and California knows that this is what is happening, and that is exactly why the Groundwater Act was enacted in 2016. At that time, the study we did was, we wanted to study how much this drought had affected the production of the crops that were the highest in terms of production, and it had not affected them. Because people, the farmers allocate their water for the more valuable crops. Would this happen, or this happen during this drought? Will this happen in the future? Can you sustain your production if you don't have the surface water? And this affects also your groundwater in the long term. And this is a question that to be responded by our policy framework, the policy framework that is normally not used. At that time of the 2011-2016 California drought, there were many responses by the government of California and also by the federal government. And there were hearings in the Senate, in the Congress. There were several state of emergencies. There were executive orders. And this is what, you see, the list continues. There were many responses, which is what made that, even though the farmers were affected, but they didn't lose all their crops, and they had support. But this support is something we don't have in other parts of the world. Here we have, for example, in Africa, we have that there is more vulnerability for many reasons. One of them because of institutional capacity, because of policy responses, because of management. And what we see is the impact that droughts, and not only droughts, but let's go to droughts, have even when they are not that intense or sustained. And in this case, we are going to have a focus on the East, in East Africa, and we have Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, Somalia. And what was the impact for societies, and how is it that they had to cope with it? The vegetation, the pasture, was very much affected by the lack of water. And this was the same in the case of the livestock. And this is what we could see in the Horn of Africa. This situation and the situation we saw in places in Europe and the situation we saw in the United States is completely different. And it comes to policies, and it comes to institutions, and it comes to management. In the case of the European Union, I'm coming back to Europe, there has been an increase in meat and milk costs as well as in every other item. This is not only in the case of Europe, but it has happened in most of the world. But it's not only because of the drought. This is only because of the invasion of Ukraine, and this is because of the impact that there have been in the supply chains. Simply, we don't have the same amount of the product available. In the case of the corn futures, what was said is that the Paris corn futures were trading above wheat, which was very uncommon. So if we put several aspects together, and this would be droughts, in the case of the climate change, droughts, higher temperatures, or floods. And then we also put in our basket our lack of efficiency, which is the result of many years of poor management and of giving priority to the fact that there is not that political will, and giving priority to aspects which are not fundamental. And we put additional stressors like the COVID-19 or like the war, and we add poverty. This is what makes us have very extreme situations. And this basket of vulnerabilities is what requires that we use our very basic policy framework I showed you at the beginning. This is the situation, for example, this is still 2022, What is the situation in several of the countries in Africa? And there is basically hunger, not starvation, but there is hunger. People have been affected. It's not only climate change. And this is something we have to discuss in venues of climate change. It's not only climate change. Climate change is only one more stressor. We have identified by now our vulnerabilities to drought, in this case urban, and of course it includes the impacts, social adaptive capacity. Do we have that capacity? Have we created it? What is our demographic sensitivity? What is our physical exposure? Are we studying them all in the same basket, which is what this systems thinking means? Are we expanding our thinking and seeing outside of our water compartment? So let me finalize by presenting again my framework for policy evaluation. For all the above situations, and with droughts, with floods, with additional stressors, we do need to describe our programs, focus on the evaluation of designs, and engage stakeholders. The stakeholder is not only civil society, the stakeholders is policymakers, as well as managers, as well as the private sector. We do need to evaluate our context, and we do need to have our strategic planning and also our implementation planning. And with that, I finish the presentation, and thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, Cecilia. Very nice presentation and very clear message we got. Okay, so the floor is now open. Any question or the comments or suggestions from the Bangkok, Thailand to Glasgow? Okay, let me begin. Cecilia, thank you very much. So you have shown a lot of the, this year's or the recent years situation of that the droughts and water scarcity or that food issues or the impact to the navigation and hydropower generation. But this symposium has the target or the topic on the how to adapt to the changes, and you have shown that the systematic diagram that we need that the system thinking and capacity development and enhance the resilience are very important. But do you have any good example that the adapting to the climate change and also or that the securing water supply makes that the local community more resilient and better fight or the cope against that other stressors like COVID-19 or that the inflation of the prices like that?
Yes, there is, and the best examples are now in the developed world because they are better prepared already. So the adaptation is easier. And we have, if I can come back to the case of California,
yep.
The current government has established a committee where they are studying what is likely to happen in the future. United States has been studying climate change for some time. And it has taken a very interesting approach, which is the approach of security. Security in two ways. One is the internal security, what can happen in US. If you have droughts, floods, extreme temperatures, how do you have to prepare yourself as a government? How do you have to prepare your institutions? What can be the role that the society can and should play? And this committee that exists in the federal government at the level of the White House, is what they have done is to put, again, a group of people together, and they have said there will be more droughts, there will be more intense temperatures as the ones we have lived. What do we have to do? So this adaptation comes with preparedness. The United States also pioneered in many aspects. They started several years ago what they call the Water Reuse Action Plan, which is an extraordinary plan because they as EPA and the rest of people interested, sectors, social and economic sectors interested on water reuse, they have recognized that water reuse, which is recycled wastewater for potable and non-potable uses, has a very important role to play because of water scarcity. So instead of waiting for the next big drought, the system has to prepare. You have to set frameworks and you have to know which role each actor is going to play, what will be the financial mechanism, and what will be the mechanism through which there will be institutional coordination. And this is what EPA and numerous sectors in the United States have been doing for 3 to 4 years. So this is what adaptation is. It's about preparedness.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, question from floor. Yes, introduce yourself.
Hello, Cecilia. This is Dinesh from Hyderabad. It was a great presentation, Cecilia. I have a question. I think you have shown how this droughts are impacting on agriculture production and water availability for municipal users, etc. There is other dimension which I would like to bring to the table for discussion. If you look at some of the examples, recent examples of how droughts have affected the way farmers use water or the response to water scarcity. The example of Murray-Darling Basin for last 10 years from 1999 to 2009. There's a major reduction in the flows in the basin, but rationing of water allocation has really helped improve the water use efficiency. So in spite of the nearly 50% reduction in the volume of water diverted for agriculture, the value of the production hasn't suffered in real terms. So you really see the big change in water use efficiency. When the volumes decrease, farmers respond by improving the efficiency of water use, by diverting water for economically more efficient uses like horticulture production, etc. We have an example from India where we studied the water use from wetlands, multiple use tanks, drought years and wet years. We found that the economic value of the water during a wet year was much lower than that of than during a drought year. So in spite of much larger volume of water being diverted for agriculture, the economic value in total, in aggregate terms, really did not improve. So we also have to see this dimension, yes, but there are places where there is no rationing or there is no institutional mechanism for allocating water. Farmers continue to use many times as inefficiently as in the normal situations. So, but then if rationing is possible, if happening, then the way the farmers respond to crisis water scarcity might be very, very different. This is a small point I want to bring to the table. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So
Thank you, Dinesh.
Yes, Cecilia?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. But yes, this is also, the wording of adaptation came with climate change, but that has always existed. We all adapt. And what Dinesh has mentioned, Taikan, is very important because the farmer or the industrial will continue using groundwater because it's cheaper, and it will continue using it if it is available and if it can extract it. And if there is no, it's not only the regulations. How do you enforce the regulations? For many years in Mexico, for many years, more than 20 years, there had been the idea of having the quotas, which is the groundwater water users associations. For some time, they work in one of the states, which is Guanajuato, but it worked because the same farmers were the ones who were monitoring. If you leave the monitoring only to the institution, they don't have the capacity. And to the federal government, they can't be monitoring every place. So yes, I agree, the responses are different, but and again, this depends on policies and institutions, but it also depends on our monitoring mechanism.
Okay. Yes, any other question or comment from the floor? Don't be shy. Okay, if not that, Cecilia, I have a simple question that you showed a lot of the anomaly climatic condition in Europe this year. And what are the perception of the ordinary people, I mean the citizens on the street? Do they relate this year's drought or the serious water shortage situation to climate change, or that they think that could be a little bit related but not mainly that due to the climate change?
This is such an important topic, Taikan, such an important topic, because we should understand what is the perception of risk, because people are concerned. Climate change has become this intangible thing that is in the world that is going to affect you in your time life, in addition to all the strikes here in UK, in addition to the lack of funding, in many additions. But climate change, there is something on which you as an individual don't seem to have anything to do except adapt, cope with it, and live with it. The Lloyds Foundation has in Singapore an excellent program on perception of risk, and that is something we all should study and should try to understand also from the policy making part. What is the perception of the people? What type of reassurance do I and should I give? And what is the role they are going to play? And there is, because of the very strong role of the media, there is a very clear understanding, perception, concern that the situation during this summer was because of climate change. And now the question of people in general, and you read in all the media, is what can we do about it? Is it only thing we can do is to cope with it? Should we only adapt? Can we go one step beyond? Can we be, by being proactive, can we do more than adapt, but adapt better, mitigate? So there are many discussions, and what is very important is that these discussions have come out of the academia to go to the public. And it is because of the interest by the public, is that changes are going to happen. There was the hope after COP26 here in Glasgow. There was the hope or the expectation that there would be more changes because of the commitments of the countries. There would be changes in types of energy use. But we shouldn't be naive. Energy use takes time, takes funding, and we still have and still live based on fossil fuel. Now, after Sharm el-Sheikh, there are other type of agreements, but people say, what role can I play on it? What else? It's not only what can the governments do, but what else can I do from putting pressure on the government to actually acting. So yes, the perception of risk is a very, very important topic.
Okay, thank you very much. We can have another short question maybe. If not, I'd like to return to the previous question or comment that you raised that about that to adapt to that water shortage, not to try to increase the water supply, but the increased water use efficiency could meet the target. But anyway, we need the investment, right, Cecilia? Mm-hmm. So that the developed states, like as you said, that we can invest to adapt to the climate change or to increase the resilience against the water security. However, how that the developing nations can invest for their future or their current water insufficiency, and does the investment can be returned in the long run? Or do you have any suggestion how we can adapt to the climate change by the investment from somewhere?
Yes, you're right. Because in terms of investment, it's financial investment, but it's also investment in terms of institutions. That's the most important investment in your institutional capacity, so that it is possible to create frameworks of adaptation and resilience, and that it is through policies and their implementations that basically you can help your population. We saw, all of us saw, the floods in Pakistan this year that impacted so many people. Can the country develop like it has existed for many years in the Nile Basin and in many other places, the flood warning, like Singapore has, even though it's a very urban place? So yes, we have again climate change, but there are so many aspects on which we can and we should invest. Again, like this, the flood warning. China has developed it very successfully. Why Pakistan doesn't develop it? So next step, what are your needs? What do you have to invest in? What type of institutional capacity do you need? And with countries that have the aid, or countries that don't have aid, but they have their own resources, to start investing on them.
Thank you. Okay, maybe it's time to. Oh, yes, please. Short question or comment, please.
Thank you so much for your presentation. My name is Mbeoge. I come from Kenya, work for the Stockholm Environment Institute. And in your presentation, you really highlighted clearly on the situation in the African context. And I think prevalences of drought is become so high. And the issue here is not even water conservation, because that water itself is not even available, and it calls for probably investment in the high-end technologies to maybe cleanse or purify some salty underground water, borehole water, or get water from the ocean, and to support the situation, because the freshwater systems are even drying further. The rivers are drying up. The boreholes are drying up. They need to be either redesigned. And this is really costly in terms of capability and capacities of the context of the development level of the African countries here. Do you have some recommendation from your experience and the work that you did to support build this? Of course, there is so much discussion in terms of adaptation fund. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. We tend to talk about technology, and the technology we need in different parts of the world is different because of the time it will take to be implemented, because of what we need, because of the money we can invest on it. There are countries that can invest in very, very sophisticated technology. There are some that don't. But whatever technology it is, again, it should be within a framework of long-term planning, because all the technology is going to be expensive. And yes, it's true. We cannot talk about conservation because you don't have the resource. The same thing happened in many places in Mexico. The National Water Commission of Mexico step in, as they do in serious droughts or in serious situations, and they say, these are the guidelines, this is the way I'm going to support. We are going to reallocate. There was no water to reallocate. So next step, what do you do? What technology can you bring? There are desalination plants, but desalination plants take time and need an institution that invests on and monitors on not only the infrastructure development, but also in operations, in maintenance, on monitoring your brand. So all this fund that is coming out because of climate change, which is welcome, of course, I think it should be used on this technology that before your technology, you have to build your institutional capacity. If not, the desalination plant, your desalination mini plants like the ones that were used in, for example, in Jakarta during COVID to provide clean water, or the type of technology that has, for example, the Red Cross, when they are in places where there are emergencies, that even then, you need, it doesn't matter the size, you need to have the person who will operate, the person who will know how to manage it and when to use it. And yes, the financing will come, but before all that, you need to have your planning in order to be able to make the best out of that technology.
Thank you very much. I think that now that you may want to raise more questions, but the time has come, so let's close this session. So Cecilia, it's pity that we cannot chat here in Bangkok, but still that thank you very much for accessing from early morning in Glasgow to these symposiums. So thank you very much, Cecilia.
Thank you, Taikani. Very good seeing you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Totahada and Professor Oki. We will now move towards our next keynote address by Professor Salimuk Haq from the International Center of Climate Change and Development in Bangladesh. For this session, I would like to invite Professor Jürgen Stamm from the Civil Engineering Department at the Technical University of Dresden, Germany, to please moderate the session.
Yeah, hello everybody. I hope that Professor Salimul Haq is available. You checked it? So, dear ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and colleagues, yesterday we heard that the focus of this conference, Water Security and Climate Change Conference in the year 2022, is on 3 core themes. First, transitioning from sectoral to nexus thinking, and we heard a lot about this. Second, robustifying climate change adaptation strategies, and also for this topic we heard a lot. And last not least, very important, translate knowledge into action. And we are very happy that we could invite a very esteemed scientist in this field, and I'm happy now I see him.